I'm gonna address the elephant in the room. There's a huge reason why I haven't been uploading. And yes, it's because I've got into medical school, which is a huge news, really. And I was so ecstatic when I received my first 3 acceptances to medical school. I was already over the moon when I got my first one, but then when I realized I got 2 more, I was even happier. And the cycle isn't even over yet, so I'm praying and hoping that I get even more acceptances. Something I wanted to really address in this video is that apologies for not uploading in a while because I was very busy doing interviews for other schools and I was preparing for those, reading the websites, trying to find out everything about the program of each school I was interviewing at. Especially, it's very useful to know why you want to go to that school, but you also want to be extremely prepared in the case they ask you the question, why do you want to come here? And not be twiddling your fingers and being like, yeah, I don't know. I like your school, it's cool, but I kind of applied here because of the name, but not much else. You don't want to say that as your answer when it comes to medical school interviews. Something I really want to talk about is how I got into med school, because I know currently many students who are pre-meds are struggling in trying to get into medical school. The reason why y'all are probably slaving away at your studies and studying really hard, for your GPA and your MCAT is because you eventually want to get into medical school and you want to become a doctor. Being someone who just got accepted, this type of pre-med dream has now turned into a reality, and it's just huge. If you've gotten into medical school recently, congratulations. You have no idea how huge it is. Like, your dreams of becoming a doctor are no longer dreams. They're now going to become goals, and you're a step closer. All you need is to finish medical school, then residency, and then you're a doctor. That's just absurd because so many people are dissuaded from getting into medical school while they're in their undergraduate years. But finally being accepted is such a huge relief in that I could finally do it. Something I really want to address in this video was how I was able to do it, and that's probably what a lot of you are very curious about. So without further ado, I want to talk about the things that I did to get into medical school. First off, I want to address a huge thing that is a big factor in medical school, and I've made other videos about it before. I'll probably link them somewhere up here about how I was able to get a 4.0 while in undergrad, as well as how I got a 517 on the MCAT. Those are my statistics. And yes, they are pretty high statistics, and that is something I do want to clear up, in that if you get into medical school, you'll have a better chance getting in if you have better grades and a better MCAT. There's really no other way of saying it, because that just shows that you're a very good student academically, and medical schools are looking for very strong performing students to be added to their class. Because if you don't do well academically in undergrad, how can the admissions officers expect you to take on the extra rigor that medical school has? There's a common analogy that medical school is like drinking water out of a fire hydrant. And I'm not sure how true that is. I'll let you guys know when I end up becoming an MS1 and perhaps experiencing that saying myself. But from what I've heard of other friends who are in medical school, they have confirmed that that saying is true. So academics are really key to doing well in medical school and getting in. So the average matriculating GPA is around a 3.7, and I think the average matriculating MCAT has risen up to 512, which they're pretty respectable stats in that regard. So in order to get into medical school, you have to be a very good student. And I would suggest checking out my videos on how to get a 4.0 and how to get a 517 MCAT for more specifics on that. But yes, you do need high stats to get into medical school. Stats aren't everything, but they are a very huge part to getting into medical school. They're more like cutoffs, not strict numbers. So for example, you don't need to have a 528 in order to get into a very top tier medical school. And as a matter of fact, you don't even need to meet their averages that are posted on MSAR. I've gotten interviews from very top tier schools, even though my MCAT was about 4 to 5 points below it. Once you get a high GPA and a decently high MCAT, that's above 90th percentile, I honestly say that you have a very good chance at any school within the nation. And I say that pretty confidently. Another thing that you really need in order to get into medical school are extracurriculars. Because from my interviewing and admissions experience, going through the process as of recently, I can tell you that a lot of the questions that have come up during interviews were very largely related to my extracurriculars. Specifically, I've had quite a lot of research, so I've gotten a lot of questions a lot about my research. And people were very curious to know about my research as well as my volunteering hours since I volunteer in the hospital. And since I did research at Caltech, like my jacket's saying, that made a lot of people super curious, especially since I didn't go to Caltech as an undergraduate during my undergrad years. A lot of people were very curious how I was able to do research there. So if you have very interesting extracurriculars, that could potentially be a talking point you can use in your interview. And medical schools are looking for students who have very interesting activities. So if you have an activity that could perhaps make someone's head turn and be like, whoa, that's super cool, you should by all means mention it on your application. And that's something that could actually set you apart from other applicants. Medical schools are looking to create classes of diverse students, and that can mean diversity in many different regards. And extracurriculars is one way you could definitely set yourself apart. So take on volunteering as well as perhaps clinical work and research as well. But don't do it just to check off boxes. Do it because it's something that you're very interested in. For example, the research project that I took on at Caltech was related to developmental neurobiology. And I, as a neurobio major, found it very interesting because I'm very curious in how the brain works. And I think it's one of the most complicated and enigmatic organs there is out there, given that we do not know so much about it. And there is so much to discover. I was super curious in the project because it utilized CRISPR-Cas9, which was a technology I heard a lot about in the news, and controversially so, as well as the fact that the project involved understanding how neurons make connections in their developmental stage. And it was something that really piqued my interest, given that I was super interested in neurobiology at the time. I mean, still now, not at the time, but still now too. I don't want you guys thinking I'm not interested in neurobiology anymore. But anyway, with that, that was something that really piqued my interest into participating in that research project. So find research projects that you're genuinely passionate about. Perhaps you might want to study cancer because cancer was something that you were always interested in, and you may want to find a step closer working towards a potential treatment to a certain type of cancer. Again, you have your own motivations and you should express them as to why you want to partake into certain extracurricular activities you want to do. And extracurricular activities don't always have to be related to pre-med things, such as volunteering in the hospital, doing research, or clinical employment. Now, yes, they can be huge parts of your extracurriculars, don't get me wrong, but you should also be able to participate in other things you like to do for fun. Like for me personally, I like to go jog and weightlift and run. And I also like to play the piano, guitar, and ukulele. And I even put down that I like going to church as an extracurricular. And it's given me an opportunity to mentor people who are younger than me and be more like an older brother figure to them. So I put that down in my extracurriculars. Again, not to check off boxes, but to show admissions who I really am and that I have an outlet outside of just academics and extracurriculars related to medicine. And medical schools, they want to see that you're a person who's able to have healthy outlets for stress, because medical school will be very stressful. And that's something admissions look forward to. They want to see that you have a way of releasing the stress in a healthy way, not just you sitting up in your room and then crying all day. I don't know what's an unhealthy way to release stress, but they want to see that you're involved in things outside of medicine. Another thing that's really helpful when it comes to getting into medical school has to revolve around your personal statements. Personal statements, and honestly, I'm going to make a whole video related to personal statements in the future. But personal statements are really key because it's your time to shine and tell medical schools why is it you want to become a doctor. That is what your primary personal statement on AMCAS is focused on. AMCAS if you're doing MD, ACOMAS if you're doing DO, and TMD SAS if you're doing Texas medical schools. Again, I'll make a separate video about this, explaining all the intricacies and details of personal statements depending which kind of school you want to apply to. But your personal statement is really your time to shine and tell medical schools why is it you want to become a doctor. And you want your motivations to become very authentic and unique to you. You don't want to come up with generic statements such as, I want to become a doctor because I want to help people, because I like science, and because I saw Grey's Anatomy when I was like 5 years old. Those are very generic motivations that do not have a lot of depth and sustenance as to why you want to become a doctor. You want to talk about experiences in your life that built you up to becoming a physician. And this is where a lot of self-reflection is needed. And the personal statement really forces you to ask yourself, is becoming a physician really a right path for me? Because if you're able to cultivate a very strong narrative out of your life experiences that led you to become a doctor, then that's going to shine through the medical schools. And they're going to be willing to invite you for an interview. However, if your narrative doesn't have a very strong motivation for why you want to become a physician, then even though your stats might be very high, medical schools will likely pick a candidate who has lower stats, but is able to express themselves and their motivations better in their personal statement. So the personal statement, it's a very subjective part of admissions because it allows medical schools to see what is it that drives you. And this is where students who have lower statistics in terms of GPA and MCAT are able to shine. And that's also why I tell such students when it comes to personal statement coaching not to give up, even if they think that their stats are not the best, because they may have life experiences that nobody else has ever had that can allow them to have a unique light on medicine. But essentially, long story short, when it comes to the primary personal statement, you want to tell medical schools why is it you want to become a doctor. And it may not be a very simple answer. In my experience, which I do not want to share too much right now, in a subsequent video I will, but in my experience, it was actually accumulation of things that led to me wanting to pursue medicine. And these are very deep personal things, which again, I will share in another video, because the personal statement oftentimes is very personal, as goes without saying. Sometimes you can have motivations in medicine that might be very vulnerable to you, and that is totally okay to write as long as it is authentic to who you are. So those are really the criteria to get into medical school. Honestly, to sum it up, here's how it is. You need to do well academically. Try to get the best GPA you can while in undergrad. And I hope that a lot of people who are just about to graduate from high school and to become a first year in college see this video, because heed my advice if you're in that path, get good grades as early as you can, because it's easier to already have a strong GPA than it is to fix a GPA that isn't that great initially. And also be aware of the MCAT. Again, have a timeline for when you want to take the MCAT roughly, and be aware that if you do well in your undergraduate classes, it's going to prepare you for the content that will come up on the MCAT exam. And when it comes time for you to study for the MCAT, learn how the test works as a standardized test. I promise you that there is a code to beat the MCAT, and it's called a standardized test, because regardless if I took the MCAT in March of 2022, which is when I personally took it, or next week, as I know some of my students are taking it. At the time of recording this video, today is January 17th, and I have a couple students who are taking it at the end of January, and a couple more who are going to take it in March. Regardless if I take it between those two times, the test should be roughly similar. Of course, it's not going to be exactly the same, but the topics that they test on and the way they test it, it has the same code and pattern behind it. So it's a very beatable test. Learn how the MCAT works as a standardized test, and learn how to answer the question stems. Read the question stem very, very, very carefully, and use the question stem to find information in the passage that will help you get the right answer. I promise you, the way in which I was able to improve the most on the MCAT was by me reading the question stem and finding a few key words in the question stem in which I was able to match into the passage and use said information in the passage to go back and find the right answer. Learn how to do that on the MCAT and get good at it, and I promise you, your score will end up improving, so long as you review your mistakes thoroughly. That's my advice on GPA and the MCAT. When it comes to extracurriculars, I would highly suggest getting into volunteering at a hospital, as well as doing research, and if you're able to, have some clinical experience, not only because it looks good for medical school. You want to do this because it'll help you gauge if becoming a physician is really the right thing for you. Perhaps you might volunteer, get involved in clinical experience, and realize, oh, maybe healthcare is not really the thing I want to do, and that's totally okay. And even if you really do want to become a doctor, getting involved in these experiences can perhaps give you even more motivation to become a physician, which is something you should definitely document in your personal statement. And it's something that you could reflect upon. You want to get into these types of extracurriculars for the experience that you get out of it, and that further drives you to become a physician, which is what medical schools really want to see. And it's ultimately to your benefit because it's confirming that even though I'm not a doctor yet, I'm involved in environments in which doctors are also involved in. And from the looks of it, yes, I do want to pursue this further and undergo even more rigorous training in medical school. That's what medical schools really want to see in your extracurriculars. Also, too, don't be afraid to get involved in extracurriculars that are outside of medicine. Don't be afraid to participate in your favorite sport. And feel free to do anything that you really like doing in your free time, such as playing instruments, being part of a concert, volunteering elsewhere in places that are not related to medicine. Feel free to do that. And anything, honestly, that ignites your passion elsewhere, because medical schools like to see students who are well-rounded and students who are able to take care of themselves outside of medicine and have a healthy outlet to release their stress. So I highly suggest to get involved in extracurriculars, both related to medicine and related outside of medicine, because that's going to build you up into a unique applicant in which medical schools will probably be like, wow, this person has done something else that I have not seen many other applicants do. I should probably pick them. Another last thing with a personal statement recap is that you want to make your motivations as to becoming a doctor true to you. Only you can tell admissions why you want to become a doctor. And that's something that is required, that's something unique to you, and something that will require a lot of introspection and self-reflection. And a lot of you asking yourself, what experiences do I have that could lead me to become a physician? That's something only you can answer. And something that I would suggest that you document down throughout your pre-med journey. If there's an experience that you've had that makes you go like, wow, I learned something new about medicine today, maybe write it down, because that's something that you could use in your personal statement. I personally, when it came to writing my personal statement, did this method for about a year, and it ultimately accumulated in my primary application personal statement, which I would be more than happy to read to you guys in another video. Once my admission cycle is completely over and I've committed to a medical school, I'd be completely happy to read my primary personal statement to you guys. Just so you could, again, it's not to copy off of me, but it's to see the type of motivations as well as the type of spirit that medical schools admissions are really looking for when it comes to writing a decent personal statement. And when it comes to writing your personal statement, there may be certain things you want to emphasize about yourself that may stand out as being very unique to medical school admissions. A good example in my case was that I really emphasized knowing how to speak Mandarin Chinese. Because in all honesty, there's not very many people who look like me who know how to speak Mandarin Chinese at the level I did in the last video I make, which I'll probably link here, or I don't know, wherever it goes. You guys will see it like pop up within the YouTube pop-ups. But that was something I really emphasized. And I've gotten a couple people who are very interested in knowing more, given that knowing Mandarin Chinese as a non-Chinese is something that people are very intrigued by, and something that could also be very applicable to medicine. Because of my clinical healthcare work experience that I've had, I've actually had to use it a couple times to communicate to patients who do not know English. So it's something that you can use to stand out. So it was something that I used to stand out. Bottom line, find things that are very unique about you, and perhaps these could be things that might cause other people to say, whoa. Find those things about you and write them down in your statement, because that's going to set you apart from other applicants. So in conclusion, I just want to say that these are a couple of the general tips that I have when it comes to getting into medical school. There's really no straightforward answer or right way to get into medical school, because a lot of these things are very unique to you. Yes, I will say I do advocate for getting high stats, but stats aren't everything. Extracurriculars is really up to you. There's no right way to go about what types of extracurriculars you want. It's really what you're passionate about. And that's really my biggest advice when it comes to medical school, getting into medical school, is to keep doing things that you're passionate about, and medical schools will see that, and they'll be curious to ask you about that, and they'll want to know more about that, which is something that you can enlighten them upon. They want to see applicants who have very unique things going on within their lives in order to contribute to a class that has many different applicants who have many different interests. That's what medical schools really want to see when it comes to building up a class of students. So I really hope that this video helped in terms of helping you find your way when it comes to medical school admissions. It's not a very straightforward process because there are a lot of subjective things like extracurriculars and personal statements involved. However, I will say that with so long as you're able to convey what you're passionate about to medical schools, I honestly think that you should be fine when it comes to this process. I wish you all luck, and may the force be with you if you are currently undergoing the medical school admissions process right now, or if you're about to undergo it in the summer of 2023. It's a huge thing to write your statements and to get everything sorted out when it comes to doing your applications. And trust me, when you get that first acceptance to medical school, it's huge. And you deserve everything and all the celebration you get out of it. I really wish you all can experience that feeling because it's just insane. But in the meantime, I hope you guys didn't miss me too much while I was gone. And I'll see you in the next video. See you later.